I came home from a 12-day business trip expecting silence, but instead I found my sister living in my house. And my mother had left a handwritten note on my kitchen counter that said, "She has kids. Let her stay." Why were my family photos gone? Why were my clothes stacked in the garage? And why did my sister panic when I reached for a folder labeled residency? That was the moment I realized this wasn't a desperate family asking for help. It was a plan that had already been set in motion long before my flight landed. Before we go any further, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is, where you are right now. If stories about family boundaries and standing up for yourself resonate with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and join me for the rest of this journey. When I was younger, my mother used to tell people that I was the calm one. She never meant it as a compliment. What she really meant was that I was the child who would give in first. If my sister wanted the last slice of pie, I was expected to hand it over. If Vanessa forgot to pay a bill, someone would quietly suggest that I cover it just this once. If Mom needed someone to drive her to appointments or help fix something around the house, my phone rang first. I spent years convincing myself that being dependable wasn't the same as being taken advantage of. Standing in my own living room that Sunday afternoon, surrounded by furniture that had been rearranged without my permission, I realized how wrong I'd been. I looked toward Mason and Chloe. Neither child had any idea why the adults were staring at each other. Mason sat on my couch playing a video game. Chloe colored quietly at my dining table with markers spread across the wood I'd spent months saving to buy. None of this was their fault. So I forced myself to smile. "Hey guys," they smiled back. "Aunt Diana." Chloe ran over and hugged me. That nearly broke my resolve. Vanessa folded her arms. "I told them you'd be happy to see them." I looked at her. "You told them this was okay. They needed stability." "You could have called. I knew you'd overreact." I let the silence answer for me. Instead of arguing, I carried my suitcase upstairs, or at least I tried to. Halfway up the stairs, I stopped. My bedroom door was open. Inside, several storage boxes lined the walls. My dresser had been pushed against another wall. The guest room, which had always stayed ready for visitors, was now filled with my belongings. Every closet shelf had been reorganized. Even my bathroom drawers had been emptied and sorted into plastic bins. It felt less like someone had visited my home. It felt like someone had edited my life. I walked back downstairs. "Which room are you sleeping in?" Vanessa didn't even hesitate. "Yours." I stared at her. "My room. It has the bigger closet. You moved into my bedroom. You weren't using it." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, because my brain couldn't process that sentence. I wasn't using it because I was in Seattle working. You still weren't here. Mom always had a way of appearing exactly when things became uncomfortable. My phone rang. Her name filled the screen. "Patricia Chapman." I answered. "Mom?" "Diana." Her voice sounded gentle. Too gentle. "I've already talked to Vanessa." "I figured." "You need to think about those children." "I am." "No, sweetheart. You're thinking about yourself." I closed my eyes. "This is my house, and she's your sister. Those aren't the same thing. She lost her apartment." "I know." "You have more than enough room." "That's not the point." Her voice sharpened. "You've always been blessed financially." I almost interrupted. She made it sound like success had simply happened to me, like I hadn't spent years studying computer science, like I hadn't worked 60-hour weeks building a cybersecurity career, like I hadn't skipped vacations, delayed buying a new car, and lived in a tiny apartment for years so I could eventually afford this house. Nothing about it had been luck. I worked for this house, and Vanessa's trying to survive. So she gets to move in without asking. Silence. Then, I gave her your spare key. I felt my stomach tighten. You what? You left it with me for emergencies. This isn't an emergency. It was to her. You never even called. I knew what your answer would be. Exactly. She knew, which was why she had never asked, because asking would have meant respecting that the decision belonged to me. Instead, she'd made it for me. I'll call you later. I ended the call before she could continue. Vanessa looked almost relieved. See? Our mother agrees. This isn't a vote. I carried my suitcase into the guest room. Every shelf was packed with my things. Several framed photographs leaned against boxes. My work awards had been wrapped in towels. Even my father's old leather desk organizer had been shoved into a plastic storage tote. I noticed something else. A jewelry box usually kept on my bedroom dresser wasn't there. Neither was the watch my father had given me before he died. I searched 3 different boxes. Nothing. Maybe I'd packed it somewhere before leaving. Maybe. Still, a knot formed in my stomach. I took out my laptop. Vanessa glanced over. What are you doing? Checking work email. She nodded and walked away. That was partly true. I opened my work inbox for a minute. Then I logged into the security dashboard for my home. When I bought the house 3 years earlier, installing a smart security system had been one of my first projects. As someone who worked in cybersecurity, I believed in documenting everything. Every door, every lock, every motion sensor, every camera, every access code, everything generated logs. The dashboard opened. Door access history. I selected the dates while I'd been away. The first alert appeared. May 18th, front door unlocked. Access method emergency key. Time 9:12 a.m., 3 days after I'd left for Seattle. I clicked the camera footage. The video loaded. There was my mother. She looked around before unlocking the front door. Seconds later, Vanessa pulled into the driveway driving a rented moving truck. Behind it came an SUV packed with furniture. I watched as Mom hugged Vanessa. Then she handed her something. A key. My spare key. Neither of them looked uncertain. Neither hesitated. They smiled, like they had planned this together. I fast-forwarded. Furniture came inside. Boxes filled the hallway. Children ran through my living room. Hours passed. Then, late in the afternoon, another vehicle arrived. A dark gray cargo van. A man I'd never seen before stepped out. He wasn't carrying furniture. He and Vanessa unloaded 6 identical banker boxes, heavy ones, each labeled with thick black marker. The camera wasn't close enough to read everything, but when one box tilted toward the lens, a few words came into focus. Property records. Vanessa hurried the boxes inside. She didn't take them upstairs. She carried every one of them directly into my home office, the same room that was now locked. I paused the video. Property records. Why would my sister need property records? And why move them into my office before she'd even unpacked her own clothes? I zoomed in as far as the footage allowed. The man's face wasn't familiar. No company logo, no uniform, just gloves. He stayed less than 15 minutes before driving away. I replayed that part 3 more times, not because I expected a different answer, because every instinct I'd developed during years of investigating digital breaches was screaming the same thing. People don't move boxes labeled property records into someone else's home unless those papers matter. The problem was, I still had no idea why they mattered. And somewhere upstairs behind a locked office door that used to belong only to me, those boxes were waiting. I barely slept that night. Not because Vanessa and the kids were in my house, not because my own bedroom had become someone else's. It was those 6 banker boxes. The words property records kept replaying in my mind. Cybersecurity had taught me something years ago. People usually protect what has value, but they hide what has intent. Those boxes weren't hidden because they were expensive. They were hidden because someone didn't want me asking questions. The next morning, I woke before everyone else. At 6:30, the house was completely quiet. I made coffee in my own kitchen while looking through the backyard windows. Everything outside looked normal. Inside, nothing did. The refrigerator now had children's artwork attached with magnets. A family calendar hung beside it, soccer practice, dentist appointments, school pickup. Vanessa had been there less than 2 weeks, yet it already looked as if she'd been living here for years. She hadn't just moved in. She had settled in. That difference mattered. I quietly grabbed my laptop again. The security dashboard contained another feature I hadn't checked the night before. The mailbox camera. I had installed a small camera overlooking the front porch after several neighbors experienced package theft the previous year. Most of the time, it only recorded delivery drivers. Now I searched the last 2 weeks. Every afternoon, the mail carrier stopped. Every afternoon, Vanessa walked outside before I would have returned from work if I'd been home. Every afternoon, she carried a stack of envelopes inside. None of them were forwarded to another address. They all came here. I enlarged several frames. Most envelopes were impossible to read. Then one caught the light. The recipient's name became visible. Vanessa Chapman. My address. I frowned. That wasn't good. An hour later, everyone finally woke up. The children got ready for school. Vanessa packed lunches. She behaved as though we were roommates sharing breakfast. "Diana." She smiled while pouring cereal. "Would you mind grabbing milk on your way home later?" I stared at her. "My way home?" "Yeah." "You mean to my house?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't start." I wasn't joking. Neither was she. The confidence in her voice bothered me more than the words themselves. She genuinely expected this arrangement to continue. After they left, I drove to the neighborhood mailbox cluster. Our mail carrier, Mr. Franklin, had worked this route for years. He recognized me immediately. "Morning, Miss Chapman." "Morning." "I have a question." He smiled. "Sure." My sister recently started receiving mail at my address." "Oh." He nodded casually. "Quite a bit, actually." "Did she submit a change of address request?" I couldn't say for certain. He shrugged apologetically, "But everything's been coming here for over a week." That answer was enough. I thanked him and left. I didn't stop there. Instead, I drove directly to the local post office. After waiting nearly 20 minutes, I spoke with a supervisor named Linda Perez. "I own a home," I explained. "Someone has started using my address without my permission." Linda listened carefully. "Are they living there?" "For now." "Family." "My sister." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Unfortunately, we can't decide who lives somewhere." "I understand." "What exactly concerns you?" "I want to know how many institutions now recognize my address as hers." She couldn't disclose private information. I expected that. But she did explain something important. If someone changes their mailing address through official channels, many organizations automatically update future correspondence. Insurance, banks, credit cards, schools, government agencies. The list was surprisingly long. I thanked her. Walking back toward my car, I realized this situation had grown beyond a family disagreement. Addresses create records. Records create history. History creates evidence. Someone was building a history. That afternoon, I returned home earlier than usual. Karen Mitchell was trimming roses next door. Karen had lived on our street almost 20 years. Friendly, talkative, the unofficial source of neighborhood news. She waved enthusiastically. Diana? I smiled politely. Hi, Karen. I was wondering when you'd be back. Were you? Vanessa told us you'd accepted a long-term consulting project. I stopped walking. What? Karen looked confused. Didn't you? No. Oh, she hesitated. I thought. What exactly did she tell everyone? Karen looked embarrassed. Only that she'd be staying here indefinitely while you traveled for work. My stomach tightened. Indefinitely? She said the house had always been intended for both of you. I forced myself to stay calm. And people believe that. Karen shrugged. It sounded reasonable. Of course it did. No one expects someone to invent a story like that. I appreciate you telling me. Karen lowered her voice. There was something else. What? I saw movers bring filing cabinets into your office. I assumed you were starting a business together. No, we're not. Karen's smile disappeared. Oh, I guess I misunderstood. No, I said quietly. You were supposed to. She looked puzzled. I didn't explain. Back inside, I unlocked the mailbox. 7 envelopes waited inside. 5 addressed to Vanessa. Only 2 addressed to me. I spread them across the kitchen island. 1 from a major bank. 1 from an auto insurance company. 1 from a pediatric clinic. Another from Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. The last one, State Department of Motor Vehicles. Every envelope carried my address. Every envelope strengthened a paper trail. Vanessa walked in carrying grocery bags. The moment she saw the mail, her expression changed. She immediately reached for her envelopes. I placed my hand over them. We need to talk. They're mine. They came to my house. They're addressed to me, using my address. She sighed dramatically. It's temporary. Temporary. You've updated your bank. My kids needed school. You updated your insurance. I needed coverage. The DMV. I had to renew my license. One answer after another. No hesitation, no guilt. As though every decision had been perfectly reasonable. You never asked. You would have said no. Exactly. She looked directly at me. I didn't have another choice. You had dozens. I had children. There it was again. The sentence everyone expected to end every discussion. I have children. As if motherhood erased consent. As if someone else's hardship automatically canceled my ownership. I picked up the envelope from Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. They're enrolled using my address. So this creates legal records. They needed to start school. You could have used Mom's address. Vanessa didn't answer. She simply looked away. That silence spoke louder than anything she'd said all day. She already knew. My mother's address wouldn't accomplish what mine could. I spent the evening researching North Carolina residency laws. Then I researched occupancy, mailing addresses, insurance, property disputes. None of it said Vanessa suddenly owned my house. But every article repeated one warning. The longer unauthorized occupancy continued, the more complicated removing someone could become, especially when children were involved. I leaned back in my chair. Something still didn't fit. The school records, the insurance, the DMV, the bank. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. Almost like someone had handed Vanessa a checklist. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification. Sender Horizon Mutual Home Insurance. Subject important update regarding occupancy information. I hadn't contacted my insurance company, so why were they contacting me? I opened the message. The first sentence made every muscle in my body go still. We are writing to confirm the recent request to update the list of permanent household occupants at your insured property. I read the first sentence 3 times before my brain caught up. To confirm the recent request to update the list of permanent household occupants at your insured property. Permanent. Not temporary. Permanent. I scrolled down. Someone had requested that Horizon Mutual update the occupancy information for my homeowner's policy. The request listed 2 additional permanent residents, Vanessa Chapman, Mason Carter, Chloe Carter. At the bottom of the email was another sentence. If you did not authorize this request, please contact us immediately. I picked up my phone before I could think myself into panic. After navigating the automated menu, I finally reached a representative. Thank you for calling Horizon Mutual. This is Angela. How may I help you today? My name is Diana Chapman. I just received an email about changes to my homeowner's insurance. I'd be happy to help. I verified my identity. Angela pulled up my policy. I see the request here. I didn't submit one. There was a brief pause. I'm sorry. I never authorized anyone to update my policy. Another pause. I understand your concern. Can you tell me what was requested? I can. Her tone became noticeably more careful. A caller informed us there had been a change in permanent occupancy, and they requested that we note 3 additional household members. I never approved that. I understand. Who made the request? I'm afraid I can't disclose personal information without an investigation. Of course. Privacy policies. Still, she offered something useful. I can tell you that the request has not yet been finalized. Good, because I want it stopped immediately. I'll place a temporary hold. Relief washed over me. At least one problem hadn't become permanent yet. Before ending the call, Angela asked a question that stayed with me. Ms. Chapman. Yes. Is there anyone currently living in the property without your authorization? I looked around my own kitchen. Children's backpacks, Vanessa's purse, shoes that weren't mine, a coffee mug with lipstick that wasn't mine. Yes. I strongly recommend documenting everything. I already am. I think that's wise. When we hung up, I sat motionless for almost a minute. Then I called someone else, Rebecca Ellis. She'd been recommended by one of my coworkers months earlier after helping him resolve a property dispute with a contractor. She specialized in real estate law. Her assistant answered, Ms. Ellis has an opening this afternoon if you're available. I'll be there. Rebecca's office occupied the 2nd floor of a restored brick building near downtown Charlotte. The waiting room was quiet. Nothing flashy. Framed maps of North Carolina hung on the walls, property surveys, historic deeds, blueprints. The entire office seemed designed to remind people that ownership was built on documentation, not emotion. Rebecca greeted me herself. She looked to be in her early 40s, dressed in a navy suit with a legal pad tucked under one arm. Diana. Yes. I'm Rebecca. We shook hands. Her office overlooked Tryon Street. After I explained everything from coming home to finding Vanessa in my bedroom to the insurance email, Rebecca never interrupted. She simply wrote notes. When I finished, she leaned back. I have several questions. I figured. First. She folded her hands. Whose name is on the deed? Mine. Only yours. Only mine. No mortgage co-owner. No. No family trust. No. She nodded. Good. That surprised me. You sound relieved. I am. Why? Because ownership isn't ambiguous. She turned her legal pad toward me and drew 3 circles. At the top, she wrote, Owner underneath, resident finally guessed. Most people confuse these. She tapped the first circle. The owner has legal title, then the second. A resident may legally live there but doesn't own it. Finally, the third. A guest has permission to stay temporarily. So where does Vanessa fall? Rebecca didn't answer immediately. That depends. On what? Whether she had your permission. I never gave it. Did anyone else claim to speak for you? I thought about my mother. Possibly. Rebecca made another note. That complicates things. But it doesn't transfer ownership. No. She looked directly at me. Not even close. I finally exhaled. It was the first reassuring sentence I'd heard in days. Rebecca continued. What concerns me isn't your ownership. What is it? The paper trail. I nodded. I found mail. How much? Bank statements? Insurance? School records? DMV correspondence? Rebecca didn't seem surprised. That's consistent. Consistent with what? Someone establishing residency. The words landed heavily. She wasn't accusing Vanessa of stealing my house. She was explaining something more practical. Someone was creating the appearance that my address had become Vanessa's permanent home. Rebecca opened a folder and slid a checklist toward me. Starting today, I want you documenting everything. I already have camera footage. Good. I've saved the emails. Excellent. I also have door access logs. Rebecca smiled for the first time. What do you do for work again? Cybersecurity. That explains a lot. She pointed to the checklist. Keep going. Save every email. Every voicemail. Every text message. Every piece of mail. Take photographs before moving anything. Write down dates. Write down times. Never rely on memory. I almost laughed. That was exactly how I investigated security breaches. Facts before conclusions. Evidence before accusations. Rebecca wasn't teaching me a new skill. She was reminding me to use the one I already had. Then she asked another question. Have you contacted your insurance company? Yes. They placed a temporary hold. Good. She wrote something else. I'd also like copies of whatever prompted that request. They said they were investigating. They'll eventually produce records. As she spoke, her assistant knocked gently on the door. Rebecca? Yes. The insurance company returned your call. Rebecca excused herself for less than 5 minutes. When she came back, she carried a printed email. They're cooperating. She handed it to me. The email confirmed that someone had contacted Horizon Mutual, claiming there had been a permanent change in household occupancy. The caller had represented themselves as speaking on behalf of the household. One sentence caught my attention. Caller stated homeowner was aware of the update, but traveling for work. I looked up. I never said that. I know. Rebecca tapped another paragraph. The investigation notes also mentioned the caller requested forms by email. They sent forms. They sent informational forms. I swallowed. So, whoever called was trying to move this forward. Yes. Rebecca became quiet. Then she looked at me in a way that made me uneasy. Diana? What? I need to ask something carefully, okay? Has anyone ever signed paperwork for you before? No. Has anyone ever had access to your electronic signature? No. Not that I know of. Rebecca slowly nodded. I hope it stays that way. What do you mean? She slid the insurance email back across the desk. Because if someone is comfortable telling a company they're acting on your behalf, she paused. The next question becomes whether they ever claim to have your permission. I stared at her. The room suddenly felt smaller. Rebecca reached into another folder. I've already requested copies of every document connected to this insurance inquiry. When will they arrive? A few days. And if they include paperwork? She met my eyes. Then we'll find out exactly whose name is on it. For the next 4 days, I lived in a strange kind of limbo. Every morning, I woke up in my own guest room. Every morning, I walked past my own bedroom knowing someone else was sleeping there. Every evening, I documented something new. A text message, another envelope, another small change inside the house. I stopped confronting Vanessa. That surprised her. She seemed almost disappointed that I wasn't arguing anymore. Instead, I observed. People reveal far more when they think you've given up. By Thursday afternoon, Rebecca called. "The documents are here. I'll leave work now. I've already reviewed them." There was a pause. "And I'd rather show you than describe them over the phone." That wasn't reassuring. When I arrived at Rebecca's office, a thick folder sat neatly on the conference table. Every page had been organized with color tabs: insurance correspondence, call logs, internal notes, electronic records. Rebecca slid the folder toward me. "I want you to see the timeline first." The first page listed every interaction Horizon Mutual had recorded. May 21st, incoming phone call, requested occupancy update, May 22nd, confirmation email sent, May 23, electronic forms accessed, May 23, electronic forms submitted, May 24th, policy review pending. Everything had happened while I was still in Seattle. Rebecca pointed to another page. "This is the access log." Every electronic document left a trail: time, device, browser, internet address. As someone who worked in cybersecurity, I knew exactly what I was looking at. "This IP address," I leaned closer. "It's local." Rebecca nodded. "It traces back to a residential internet provider." She turned another page. "The insurance company obtained subscriber information after opening their internal fraud review." I looked down. The service address was familiar. Painfully familiar. Patricia Chapman's home. My mother's internet connection. I closed my eyes. For a second, I hoped I had misunderstood. Maybe Mom had simply let Vanessa borrow her Wi-Fi. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Rebecca didn't interrupt my thoughts. She simply waited. Finally, I spoke. "So the forms were submitted from my mother's house?" "Yes." "But that doesn't prove who completed them." "No. It proves where they originated." I nodded slowly. Facts, not assumptions. One of the first rules I'd learned in digital investigations. Rebecca slid another document across the table. This is where things become more concerning. It was a completed occupancy update form. Most of it contained routine information: property address, policy number, names of occupants, move-in date. Then I reached the signature section. I stopped breathing. At the bottom of the page, someone had signed my name. Diana Chapman. At first glance, it looked convincing. The looping D, the long tail beneath Chapman, the slight upward angle. Anyone casually looking at it would probably accept it. I didn't, because it wasn't mine. I picked up a pen from Rebecca's desk. "Watch." I signed my name on a blank sheet. Then I placed it beside the insurance form. The differences became obvious immediately. My real signature always connected the I and A in Diana. The fake one lifted the pen. My capital C always leaned slightly forward. The fake one stood perfectly upright. Tiny differences, the kind most people never noticed. But I signed legal documents almost every week. I knew my own handwriting. Rebecca nodded. "I thought you'd see it." "I didn't sign this." "I believe you." Then she handed me another report. The insurance company compared the electronic submission. Unlike handwritten signatures, electronic signature platforms stored technical information: timestamp, device, operating system, browser version, submission method. The form had been completed using a Windows laptop. Chrome browser. Submitted at 8:47 p.m. from Patricia's home internet. I frowned. "My laptop was with me in Seattle." "I know. The timestamp matches your hotel receipts." I looked at Rebecca. "So they couldn't even claim I signed it." "Correct." "But..." She hesitated. Someone still represented it as your authorization. I rubbed my forehead. It wasn't just dishonest anymore. Someone had intentionally tried to create official records using my identity. Rebecca quietly pushed one more document toward me. What is this? The phone recording summary. The insurance company records customer calls. They're not releasing the audio yet, but they provided a transcript excerpt. I began reading. Representative, has the homeowner approved these changes? Caller, yes, she's traveling for work, but she already agreed. Representative, and you're authorized to speak on her behalf. Caller, absolutely. I looked up. Can they identify the voice? Not yet. But, Rebecca folded her hands. The representative made a note. I kept reading. Caller identified herself as homeowner's mother. The room became completely silent. I stared at those 7 words. Homeowner's mother. Not family friend, not neighbor, not unknown caller. Homeowner's mother. Patricia hadn't hidden who she was. She had openly presented herself as acting for me. I felt something inside me shift. Until that moment, a small part of me had still hoped Mom believed she was helping, that maybe she'd simply made terrible decisions trying to support Vanessa. This required planning. She hadn't accidentally crossed a boundary. She'd deliberately stepped over it. Rebecca finally spoke. Diana, I know. No. She shook her head gently. I don't think you do. What do you mean? She opened another folder. The insurance company only shared these documents because they suspected irregularities. Okay. But that's not the only thing I requested. I looked at her. I also asked whether anyone requested additional documents. They did. What kind? Rebecca slid a printed email across the table. The subject line read, "Requested supporting authorization below." It was a short exchange between Horizon Mutual and the person who had submitted the occupancy request. Insurance representative, for our records, please provide documentation confirming homeowner authorization. My heart started pounding. Someone had replied. There was an attachment. The attachment itself had been removed during the investigation, but its file name remained. Rebecca tapped the page. I read it twice. Then a third time. The attachment had been named Diana Chapman Authorization.pf. I looked at Rebecca. I've never created a file with that name. I didn't think you had. So what was inside it? We don't know yet. Can they recover it? They're trying. I leaned back slowly. Someone hadn't just forged a signature. Someone had created an entire authorization document pretending to be me. Rebecca closed the folder. I think it's time. For what? She reached into her briefcase and removed another document, a formal letter. On her law firm's letterhead. At the top in bold print were the words, "Notice to vacate property." She placed it in front of me. I recommend delivering this immediately. I stared at the letter. Once I handed it to Vanessa, there would be no pretending this was just a misunderstanding anymore. There would be no going back to family conversations around the dinner table. The next move would change everything. I held the notice in my hands for nearly an hour before driving home. Not because I doubted what needed to happen, because I understood what it meant. Once I handed Vanessa that letter, the argument would stop being about family expectations. It would become a legal dispute. There would be no pretending this was simply 2 sisters who disagreed. There would be a paper trail, deadlines, consequences. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed 3 unfamiliar cars parked outside. I frowned. Vanessa hadn't mentioned having visitors. As I stepped through the front door, I immediately heard voices, lots of them. Laughter, Plates clinking, someone had ordered barbecue. For a moment I wondered if I'd accidentally walked into the wrong house. Then my Uncle Harold spotted me. There she is. Every conversation stopped. My mother stood in the dining room arranging paper plates. Vanessa was carrying sweet tea into the living room. My Aunt Denise sat comfortably on my sofa. My cousin Marcus leaned against my fireplace. 8 people, inside my house, without my permission. Mom smiled as if nothing unusual was happening. Perfect timing. I slowly closed the front door behind me. What's going on? We're having dinner. In my house? Patricia laughed softly. Well, yes. I looked around. The dining table I'd spent months restoring with my father years ago was covered with food. The kitchen island was crowded with drinks and desserts. Someone had even moved my coffee station to make room for a slow cooker. No one had asked again. I wasn't invited. Mom looked confused. You live here. Exactly. Harold chuckled awkwardly. We thought this would help everyone talk. I looked directly at Patricia. You organized this. She folded her hands. I thought the family should hear both sides. I almost smiled. Both sides. Interesting choice of words. Because no one had called to ask for mine. They had all been invited before I even knew dinner existed. I placed my laptop bag on the counter. Fine. We'll talk. Everyone took their seats. I remained standing. Patricia cleared her throat. Diana, Vanessa is going through a difficult time. I said nothing. She lost her apartment. Still nothing. She has 2 children depending on her. Silence. You've always been successful. There it was again, the same script. Success created obligation. My hard work belonged to whoever needed it most. Mom continued. You have extra bedrooms. Vanessa nodded dramatically. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. You already did. She sighed loudly. I didn't mean emotionally. I meant legally. That word changed the room. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. Harold frowned. Legally, Mom answered before I could. She's exaggerating. No, I said calmly. I'm being precise. Vanessa leaned back. You hired a lawyer. Yes. Aunt Denise looked genuinely surprised. A lawyer for family. I met her eyes. No, for my property. Silence settled over the room. Patricia broke it. You've always been so dramatic. I reached into my laptop bag. No, I've become organized. I placed my computer on the dining table. Vanessa's face changed immediately. What are you doing? Showing everyone why we're here. Mom quickly interrupted. We don't need all that. I think we do. I connected my laptop to the television mounted above the fireplace. 1 cable, a few clicks. My home security footage filled the screen. The timestamp appeared. May 18th. 9:12 a.m. Mom stiffened. Vanessa stopped breathing for just a second. No one else knew what they were about to watch. The video began. Patricia unlocking my front door. Vanessa arriving with the moving truck. Furniture entering my house. Boxes stacked in my hallway. The children running upstairs. Then, Mom handed Vanessa my spare key. No one spoke. The only sound was the television. When the footage ended, Uncle Harold slowly looked toward Patricia. You had her emergency key? Patricia answered quietly. Yes. You gave it away. It was temporary. I clicked the next clip. Another timestamp. Another camera angle. The gray cargo van arrived. The unknown man unloaded the banker boxes. One tilted just enough for the camera to capture the label. Property records. Marcus leaned forward. What are property records? I don't know, I answered honestly. Because no one has let me see them. Vanessa immediately crossed her arms. They're private. I nodded. Exactly. The room became noticeably quieter. Then I opened another folder, the insurance documents. I projected the email from Horizon Mutual, the request to add permanent occupants, the transcript stating the homeowner had approved the changes, the note identifying the caller as the homeowner's mother. This time no one interrupted. I could actually see people reading, line by line, word by word. Finally, Harold spoke. Patricia, you told them Diana approved this. Mom looked irritated. I knew she'd eventually agree. That's not what they asked. No answer. I clicked again. The access logs, the IP address, the insurance submission timeline. Rebecca had helped me organize everything into a simple chronological presentation. No emotional language, no accusations, just dates, times, documents, evidence. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I wanted facts to speak louder than feelings. Vanessa finally stood. This isn't fair. I looked at her. What part? You made me look like a criminal. I showed everyone what happened. You don't understand what it's like being a single mother. I understand perfectly. I just don't think that gives you permission to move into my home. She looked around the room. Doesn't anyone care about my kids? Aunt Denise answered first. We do. Harold nodded. Of course. Marcus agreed. But he hesitated. Why didn't you ask Diana first? Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out because there wasn't an honest answer. She hadn't asked because she already knew the answer would be no. Mom tried one last time. This family is supposed to help each other. I nodded. I agree. Then I looked directly at everyone sitting around the table. So tell me, if one of you owned a house, would you expect someone to move in while you were out of town? No one answered. I continued. Would you expect someone else to give away your emergency key? Still silence. Would you expect your signature to appear on insurance paperwork you never signed? Marcus slowly shook his head. No. Harold looked down at his plate. No. Even Aunt Denise looked uncomfortable. The mood in the room had changed. It wasn't because I had raised my voice. It was because the story everyone had been invited to hear wasn't the story supported by the evidence. Then something unexpected happened. Aunt Denise quietly looked at Patricia. I remember something. Mom's eyes snapped toward her. Denise continued carefully. About a month ago. You told me not to worry. She frowned as she searched her memory. You said... She looked directly at me. Diana would never force children out of a house. She'll feel too guilty to stop us. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for their food. I turned toward my mother. She didn't deny saying it. She simply looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. This hadn't been desperation. It hadn't even been hope. It had been a strategy built around one assumption, that I would rather sacrifice my own boundaries than risk looking like the villain. I reached into my bag one final time. I removed the envelope Rebecca had prepared. I slid it across the dining table toward Vanessa. She looked down. Her face slowly lost color. Across the top in bold letters were the words, "Notice to vacate property." She looked up at me in disbelief. You can't be serious. I held her gaze. I've never been more serious in my life. Nobody touched the food. The pulled pork cooled. The cornbread sat untouched. Even the children sensed something had changed. Mason quietly picked up Chloe's coloring book and whispered, "Let's go upstairs." I was grateful he did. Whatever happened next wasn't something they needed to witness. Vanessa stared at the envelope as though it might disappear if she refused to open it. Finally, she slid the notice out. Her eyes moved across the first page, then the second. By the third page, she slammed it back onto the table. You actually hired a lawyer to evict your own sister. I hired a lawyer to protect my property. You've lost your mind. No. I stopped ignoring what was happening. Patricia stood abruptly. We're leaving. I looked at her. Not yet. She frowned. You don't get to tell me when I can leave. Actually, I do. I looked around the room. This is my house. No one argued. For the first time since I'd walked through my front door 6 days earlier, everyone seemed to remember that simple fact. Vanessa folded the notice. I'm not signing anything. You don't have to. I'll fight this. That's your right. You think a judge is going to throw 2 children out onto the street? I didn't answer immediately, because that wasn't what this case was about. The judge won't be deciding whether your children deserve a home. I spoke quietly. The judge will decide whether you had the right to move into mine. She shook her head. You've become cold. No. I've become clear. The next morning, Rebecca filed the paperwork. North Carolina law required a specific process. There were notices, waiting periods, formal filings. Nothing happened overnight. Rebecca had warned me about that from the beginning. The law moves carefully, she'd said. And that's a good thing. Because if it moved on emotion, it would fail everyone. During the following week, I continued documenting everything. Nothing more, nothing less. Vanessa began acting differently. At first, she ignored me completely. Then she became unusually friendly. Diana. She smiled one afternoon. I made your favorite pasta. I already ate. You've barely spoken to the kids. I won't involve them. They miss you. I'll see them when the adults stop using them as shields. Her smile disappeared. A different strategy had failed. Then came guilt. Mom called almost every evening. You know your sister isn't sleeping. Neither was I, but she never asked about that. She's terrified. I was terrified when I walked into my own house. You always make everything about yourself. I almost laughed. I'd spent my entire life making everything about everyone else. Apparently, setting one boundary erased 20 years of sacrifice. After I stopped answering, the messages became longer. Voicemails, texts, Bible verses, quotes about forgiveness, family photographs from happier years. Anything that might make me feel guilty enough to back down. Instead of deleting them, I saved every single one. Rebecca had given me one instruction: preserve everything. So I did. 2 weeks later, Vanessa filed her response. Rebecca called as soon as she received it. You should come by. When I arrived, she handed me a copy. I read the first page, then the second. Then I stopped. This says, I know. She claims she was invited. Rebecca nodded. She states that you offered the home as a long-term residence. That's completely false. I agree. I kept reading. According to the filing, I had supposedly told Vanessa she could stay as long as necessary. I had promised the children stability. I had encouraged her to change her mailing address. By the third page, I barely recognized the person being described. It wasn't me. It was a fictional version of me, one that existed only on paper. Rebecca wasn't concerned. Anyone can make a claim. Exactly. But claims need evidence. She opened another folder. Which is why I asked you to preserve everything. One by one, she organized the documents across the conference table. The security footage, the door access logs, the insurance records, the emails, the mailbox photographs, the timeline. Then she added something new. What's this? The school enrollment records. I looked at her. You got them? Through the proper legal process. She pointed to the enrollment application. Notice anything? I scanned the page. Emergency contact, medical information, home address, then parent signature. Nothing unusual. Rebecca tapped another section. Look here. Under length of residence. Vanessa had written 3 months. I frowned. She'd only been there for a few days. Exactly. And notice the enrollment date. It was dated 4 days before I returned from Seattle. She'd enrolled the children before I'd even come home, which meant she had never intended this to be temporary. I slowly leaned back in my chair. Every document told the same story. Not a desperate woman making last-minute decisions, a woman executing a plan. Rebecca smiled faintly. Judges notice patterns. And this is becoming one. The hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday morning. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse wasn't dramatic. No towering marble columns, no television cameras, just ordinary people dealing with ordinary legal problems, property disputes, traffic violations, probate cases, real life. Rebecca met me outside courtroom 4C. You ready? As I'll ever be. Vanessa arrived a few minutes later with her attorney. Mom followed close behind. She wouldn't even look at me. Inside the courtroom, everyone remained surprisingly calm. No shouting, no dramatic speeches, just procedure. When our case was called, both attorneys approached the bench. Rebecca presented our exhibits in chronological order. Security footage, door logs, insurance records, mail, enrollment dates, electronic timestamps, no opinions, no emotional language, just evidence. Vanessa's attorney argued that she had acted in good faith, that she believed family permission had been given, that removing the children would create hardship. The judge listened carefully, then he asked a simple question. Ms. Chapman. He looked directly at Vanessa. When exactly did your sister invite you to live in her home? Vanessa hesitated. It was around May. What date? I don't remember. The judge nodded. That's understandable. He turned toward Rebecca. Counsel? Rebecca handed over a document. The homeowner was in Seattle on every date Ms. Chapman identified. The judge reviewed it quietly. Then he looked back at Vanessa. You've stated under oath that the homeowner encouraged you to establish residency. Yes. Do you have any text messages? No. Emails? No. Letters? No. Any written communication whatsoever? Vanessa swallowed. No. The judge made another note. Then he picked up the school enrollment form. His expression changed slightly. He looked at Vanessa again. Miss Chapman, you indicated on this official document that you had already resided at the property for 3 months. Yes. The judge lifted another exhibit, the security footage timeline. This evidence suggests you entered the home for the first time, approximately 11 days before submitting that form. The courtroom became completely silent. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone. He simply asked one final question. Can you explain that discrepancy to the court? Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence lasted only a few seconds. But inside a courtroom, a few seconds can feel like forever. Vanessa looked at her attorney. Her attorney looked back at her. Neither of them spoke. Finally, the judge repeated the question. Ms. Chapman, can you explain why you stated you had lived at the property for 3 months? Vanessa cleared her throat. I misunderstood the question. The judge didn't react. You misunderstood? Yes. I thought it meant how long I intended to live there. Her own attorney closed his eyes for a brief moment. Even he knew that answer wasn't helping. The judge glanced at the enrollment form again. The question asks for length of residence. Yes, Your Honor. It does not ask how long you plan to stay. No, sir. He made another note. Then he turned toward Rebecca. Counsel, anything further? Rebecca stood. Yes, Your Honor. She walked to the evidence table and picked up another folder. There is one additional timeline I'd like the court to consider. She handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. I recognized it immediately. It was the master timeline we'd spent hours building. Every event appeared in order. May 15th. I boarded my flight to Seattle. May 18th. Patricia used my emergency key. May 18th. Moving truck arrived. May 19th. Utilities connected. May 20th. Mail forwarding initiated. May 21st. Insurance company contacted. May 22nd. School enrollment submitted. May 23rd. Occupancy forms completed. May 24th. Authorization document uploaded. May 27th. I returned home. Rebecca spoke calmly. None of these events occurred after the homeowner returned. She paused. They all occurred before Ms. Chapman had any opportunity to give consent. The judge slowly reviewed every page. He didn't rush. He compared dates, highlighted sections, cross-referenced exhibits. The courtroom remained completely quiet. Eventually, he looked toward Vanessa. Miss Chapman. Yes, Your Honor. Is there any evidence that your sister approved any of these actions before returning from Seattle? Vanessa hesitated. No. Any witness? No. Any written authorization? No. Any phone records? No. The judge nodded once. Then he looked toward Patricia. Mrs. Chapman. She seemed startled. Yes. You were identified during the insurance investigation as the individual who contacted the insurance carrier. Patricia straightened in her chair. I was only trying to help. I understand. The judge's tone remained polite. Did your daughter authorize you to speak on her behalf? Patricia didn't answer immediately. I believed, the judge interrupted gently. I'm not asking what you believed. I'm asking whether she authorized you. Patricia looked down. No. The answer landed heavily. The judge wrote something else. No one said another word. About 20 minutes later, both attorneys finished their arguments. The judge removed his glasses. I'm prepared to rule. Every muscle in my body tightened. This matter concerns ownership, unauthorized occupancy, and representations made to third parties. He looked at the exhibit stacked before him. The evidence establishes that Ms. Diana Chapman is the sole legal owner of the property. He paused. It further establishes that additional occupants entered the residence without the homeowner's knowledge while she was out of state. He continued reading. The court finds no evidence that Ms. Chapman granted permission for permanent residency. I finally allowed myself to breathe. Then came the sentence I'd been waiting weeks to hear. The court grants the petition for possession. Vanessa lowered her head. The judge continued. Ms. Chapman and all occupants must vacate the property within the statutory time period. No celebration, no applause. Just another legal ruling on an ordinary Tuesday morning. But for me, it felt like someone had finally acknowledged reality. The judge wasn't finished. He turned one final page. The court also notes several inconsistencies in documents submitted by Ms. Chapman. He looked directly at Vanessa. Although those issues are not the subject of today's proceeding, the court expects all future representations to government agencies and private institutions to be accurate. Vanessa quietly nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Failure to do so may result in consequences beyond this case. I understand. The hearing ended. People slowly began gathering their papers. Rebecca leaned toward me. We did it. I nodded, but strangely, I didn't feel victorious. Mostly, I felt exhausted. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Vanessa caught up with me before I reached my car. Diana. I turned around. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had stood in my kitchen 2 weeks earlier. Her shoulders were slumped. Her eyes were swollen. I never thought you'd actually go through with this. I know. I thought you'd eventually give in. I know. She looked away. I didn't want to hurt you. I believe that. She looked surprised. You do. I believe you didn't wake up one morning planning to destroy our relationship. I paused. But you kept making choices that did exactly that. She didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, I was scared. I know. I couldn't afford another apartment. I know. I didn't know what else to do. You had another option. She looked at me. You could have asked. She closed her eyes. I was afraid you'd say no. I probably would have. I know. That doesn't mean you lost the right to ask. For the first time since this nightmare began, Vanessa cried without trying to make anyone else responsible for fixing it. No accusations, no guilt, just tears. I almost hugged her. Almost. Instead, I simply said, I hope you find a place that's truly yours. Then I got into my car. 3 days later, Rebecca called. The sheriff's office has confirmed the move-out schedule. So it's really happening? Yes. When should I be there? The morning of the inspection. I thanked her and hung up. That Friday, I arrived at the house before sunrise. The driveway looked strangely empty. No toys, no bicycles, no extra vehicles. Just my car. A deputy sheriff met me at the front door. Rebecca arrived a few minutes later. Together, we entered the house. It was quiet, almost painfully quiet. Room by room, we completed the inspection. Living room, kitchen, bedrooms, garage, everything was documented, everything was photographed. Then I walked upstairs into my bedroom. The closet stood empty. The bed had been stripped. The nightstands were gone. It looked like someone had erased weeks of chaos overnight. I opened my dresser. Empty. Bathroom cabinets? Empty. Finally, I walked into my home office. The room that had been locked from me. The banker boxes were gone. Every single one. Only a few dust outlines remained on the hardwood floor where they'd been stacked. Rebecca noticed me staring. What is it? The boxes. What boxes? The ones labeled property records. She looked around. They're gone. So are the filing cabinets. I slowly scanned the room again, then my eyes landed on something else. Against the far wall, my small fireproof safe stood slightly crooked. I walked over. The electronic keypad was still locked. But something felt wrong. I knelt beside it. The safe door wasn't fully flush with the frame anymore. There was a faint scratch near the locking mechanism. Someone had tried to force it open. Or someone had succeeded. My heartbeat quickened. I entered the code. The door clicked open. Inside, several folders remained exactly where I'd left them. My passport, property deed, birth certificate, everything appeared untouched. Then I looked toward the upper shelf. The small cedar keepsake box my father had given me before he passed away was gone. I stared at the empty space for several seconds before my mind accepted what my eyes were seeing. The cedar box was gone. It wasn't valuable in the way an insurance company would define value. It contained no jewelry, no cash, no stock certificates, no expensive collectibles. To anyone else, it was just an old wooden box with worn brass hinges. To me, it held the last pieces of my father. I slowly searched every shelf inside the safe, then every drawer in my office, every closet, every storage bin. I already knew I wouldn't find it. Still, I looked. Hope has a strange way of surviving long after logic gives up. Rebecca watched quietly until I finally stopped searching. What was in it? I swallowed. My dad's watch. She nodded. What else? A handwritten letter. Family photographs. His old military challenge coin. And, I smiled sadly, a tiny wooden chess knight. Rebecca looked confused. A chess piece? My father taught me to play when I was 8. He always kept one knight in his pocket. Before he died, he put it in that box. It reminded him that sometimes the smartest move wasn't the biggest one. She was quiet for a moment. We'll document everything. She photographed the empty space inside the safe, the scratches around the lock, the position of the shelves, every angle, every detail. Then she asked, "Who knew this box existed?" I thought carefully. "Very few people." "Your mother, yes." "Vanessa?" "Probably." "Anyone else?" "No." Rebecca nodded. "I think we should ask." I didn't call Vanessa immediately. Instead, I reviewed the security footage again. Although most of the indoor cameras had been unplugged shortly after she moved in, one camera had continued recording. The garage. Nobody had thought about the garage, because nobody realized it backed up to cloud storage independently. I opened the recordings from the day before the sheriff's inspection. Moving truck, furniture, suitcases, children's bicycles, everything left the house. Then, 43 minutes before they drove away, Vanessa walked into the garage carrying something against her chest, the cedar box. She looked around, opened the SUV, placed it inside, closed the rear hatch, drove away. I paused the video, then replayed it. There was no doubt. Rebecca watched beside me. "That's enough." "It is." "Yes." "We know where it went." I called Vanessa that evening. She answered after the third ring. "What?" "I know you have Dad's cedar box." Silence. "I saw the video." Another long silence. Finally. "I didn't steal it." "You carried it out of my house." "I thought it was mine." I almost laughed. "You thought Dad's keepsake box belonged to you." "I thought—" She hesitated. "I thought Mom wanted me to take it." That answer surprised me. "What?" "She said you already had everything else." I closed my eyes. Of course. Even now? Even after the court case? Everything still had to become a competition. "You knew what was inside." "I knew. And you still took it." "I wasn't thinking." "No." "You weren't." Vanessa's voice became smaller. "I'll bring it back." "When?" "Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. "I'll be there." The next morning she arrived alone. No children, no moving truck, no drama. She carried the cedar box carefully with both hands. When she handed it to me, she didn't let go immediately. "I'm sorry." I looked at her. "For which part?" She lowered her eyes. "I don't even know anymore." That was probably the most honest thing she'd said in months. I opened the box while she stood there. The watch was inside. The photographs, the challenge coin, the chess knight. Everything. Then I noticed something new. A folded envelope. I frowned. "I've never seen this." Vanessa looked surprised. "I didn't put that there." The envelope was yellowed with age. Across the front in my father's handwriting were 4 words. "For both my girls." I looked at Vanessa. She looked just as confused. Carefully, I unfolded the letter. It had been written only a few weeks before Dad passed away. He wrote about how differently the two of us saw the world. He wrote that I believed in planning. Vanessa believed in people. Neither quality was wrong. Both could become destructive without balance. Then I reached the final paragraph. "If either of you ever believes my love was something you had to compete for, then I've failed as your father. Don't measure your worth against each other. Build lives you're proud of, then leave each other enough room to come home by choice, not obligation. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt completely different this time. Not hostile, just heavy. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I don't remember seeing him write that. I don't either. She stared at the letter. I spent years thinking Mom loved you more. I looked at her in surprise. You did. You had the grades? The career. The nice house. The promotions. I shook my head. I spent years believing Mom loved you more. She looked up. What? Every time you got into trouble, everyone expected me to fix it. Because you were the one who needed protecting. Vanessa slowly sat down. I never thought about it that way. I know. Neither of us had. We'd spent decades comparing what we received. Neither of us noticed we were being given different burdens. A few minutes later, another car pulled into the driveway. My mother. She stepped out slowly. When she saw the cedar box sitting between us, she stopped walking. I wondered when you'd find that letter. I stared at her. You knew it was there? Patricia nodded. I found it after your father died. And you never gave it to us. I didn't think the timing was right. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. For 12 years, she looked down. I thought, she paused, I could hold the family together. Vanessa let out a quiet, exhausted laugh. You didn't hold us together, Mom. You kept deciding for everyone. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I only wanted to help. For years, I said quietly, you kept solving problems nobody asked you to solve. And every time you did, someone else had to live with the consequences. Mom didn't defend herself. For the first time I could remember, she simply listened. After a long silence, she whispered, I was wrong. No excuses, no conditions. Just 4 simple words. It wasn't enough to repair everything, but it was enough to begin telling the truth. Before leaving, Patricia looked at me. I know I can't ask you to trust me again. You can't. I just hope one day you'll let me earn a small part of it back. I didn't answer, because trust wasn't something I could give with another conversation. It would have to be built the same way it had been broken. One choice at a time. As Mom drove away, my phone vibrated. It was a text message from her. Can we meet next Sunday? Just the 2 of us? No pressure. If the answer is no, I'll respect it. For the first time in weeks. She had asked instead of assumed. I looked at the message for a long time before locking my phone. I didn't answer my mother's text that day, or the next. Not because I wanted to punish her. I simply wasn't ready. For most of my life, I had responded immediately whenever my family needed something. A ride, money, time, advice, forgiveness. They had grown used to my availability. Now they would have to get used to my silence. Silence, I had learned, wasn't always avoidance. Sometimes it was where healthy decisions were made. A week later, I finally replied. Sunday, 1 hour. Coffee shop, nothing more. Mom answered almost instantly. Thank you. I'll be there. The coffee shop sat a few miles from my neighborhood. Neutral ground, no family photographs, no childhood memories, no emotional advantage for either of us. When I arrived, Patricia was already sitting at a corner table. She looked older than I remembered, not physically, just tired. She stood when she saw me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't. She nodded. I understand. We ordered coffee. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Mom took a slow breath. I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times. I believe you. But every version sounded like an excuse. I waited. So I'll just tell you the truth. I appreciated that. When your father died, I was terrified. I knew. I didn't want Vanessa to fail. I know? I also knew you could survive almost anything. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. So every time I had to choose where my energy went, I chose the child I thought was weaker. I stared into my coffee. I understand the fear, she nodded, but I confused helping with rescuing. And I confused trusting you with neglecting you. Neither of us spoke for a while. Those words didn't erase what had happened, but they explained it in a way that finally made sense. Mom reached into her purse. I brought something. She slid an old envelope across the table. Inside was my emergency house key, the same one she'd given Vanessa. I had another copy made years ago. I shouldn't have. I don't want it anymore. I looked at the key. Small, ordinary, yet somehow it represented years of blurred boundaries. I picked it up, placed it in my purse. Then I said something I had spent weeks preparing. I forgive you. She immediately started crying. I raised my hand gently. I'm not finished. She nodded. I forgive you, because I don't want to carry this anger forever. She listened carefully. But forgiveness isn't permission. Her expression changed. I know. No. I smiled softly. I need to hear myself say it. She nodded again. You will never have an emergency key to my house again. I understand. You won't make decisions for me. I won't. If you want something, you ask. Yes. If I say no, that's the end of the conversation. She wiped her eyes. I can do that. I hope so. Because this wasn't a negotiation. It was a boundary. One I'd never been allowed to have before. Over the next 3 months, my life slowly became recognizable again. The locks on the house were replaced. Every access code changed. The smart security system was upgraded. I disabled every old emergency credential, created new encryption keys, added multi-factor verification for every connected device. Old habits from cybersecurity blended naturally into everyday life. Trust was no longer assumed, it was managed. I also met with Rebecca one final time. She suggested updating several legal documents, not because another crisis was coming, but because preparation was always cheaper than repair. We reviewed my homeowner's records, updated emergency contacts, removed outdated authorizations, created a written property access policy for anyone who might house sit in the future. Then she smiled. I hope I never have to represent you again. I hope so too. We both laughed. Vanessa eventually found a small townhouse across Charlotte. It wasn't large, it wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. She found steady work managing the front office of a pediatric dental clinic. The hours were predictable, the benefits were decent. Most importantly, she stopped waiting for someone else to rescue her. One Saturday afternoon, she invited me over. No pressure, no expectations, just lunch. For the first 30 minutes, we mostly talked about Mason's baseball season and Chloe's latest art project. It felt normal, awkward at times, but honest. As I prepared to leave, Vanessa walked me to the front door. I've been meaning to ask you something. What? Why didn't you humiliate me after court? I looked at her. What would that have accomplished? You could have. I could have. You had every reason. I wasn't trying to win against you. I was trying to stop losing myself. She stood quietly for a moment. I never understood that. I know. I do now. She smiled sadly. I wish I'd learned it another way. So do I. Before I left, Chloe ran outside carrying a small drawing. She handed it to me. It showed 2 houses. One was larger, one was smaller. Between them was a path lined with flowers. Above both houses, she'd written in careful handwriting, "Family visits. Family doesn't take." I felt my throat tighten. Sometimes children understood things adults spent years avoiding. I hugged both kids, then drove home. That evening, I unlocked my front door. My house was quiet, exactly the way I liked it. Not empty, peaceful. There was a difference. I walked into my office. The cedar keepsake box rested on the bookshelf beside my father's photograph. I opened it one more time. The watch, the challenge coin, the chess knight, his letter. Everything was back where it belonged. I read the last paragraph again. Build lives you're proud of, then leave each other enough room to come home by choice, not obligation. For years, I thought boundaries pushed people away. What I eventually learned was the opposite. Healthy boundaries don't destroy relationships. They reveal which ones are capable of surviving honesty. I still loved my mother. I still loved my sister. I adored my niece and nephew, but love no longer meant unlimited access. It no longer meant surrendering my home, my peace, or my voice. My front door had new locks. More importantly, so did my life. And this time I was the only person holding the keys. When people grow up being told that love means sacrifice, it's easy to confuse generosity with obligation. Many of us become the dependable one in the family, the person who always says yes, fixes every problem, and quietly absorbs the cost. It can take years to realize that helping someone and allowing them to cross your boundaries are not the same thing. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for protecting your peace, I hope this story reminds you that boundaries are not acts of revenge. They are acts of self-respect. Forgiveness can bring healing, but forgiveness does not require restoring the same level of access to your life. Trust is rebuilt through consistent actions, not heartfelt apologies alone. Sometimes the healthiest relationships are the ones that learn to exist with clear expectations, honest communication, and mutual respect. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no without carrying shame for it. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to establish difficult boundaries with someone you loved. Your experiences may encourage someone else who feels alone. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family resilience, justice, and healing, I hope you'll consider subscribing and joining us for the next journey. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.